In the year 1191, the sands of the desert were about to witness a meeting of legends. Two men from two different worlds were locked in a struggle for the Holy Land. On one side was Richard the Lionheart, a king who lived for the sword. On the other side was Salahuddin Ayyubi, known to the world as Saladin. Saladin was a man of peace, forced into war. He was famous for his wisdom and his mercy. He had united the East under one banner, not through fear, but through respect. Richard had arrived with a massive fleet. He wanted to take Jerusalem back. The heat of the desert was like nothing the Europeans had ever felt. But they were determined. They began a long march along the coast toward the city of Jaffa. Saladin's army moved like the wind. They were masters of the desert. They watched the Crusaders from the high hills, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Saladin told his men, "Protect the land. Do not harm those who do not fight." The Crusaders were heavy iron men. Their chainmail weighed 60 pounds. Every day, the Mamluk archers rode close. They fired clouds of arrows to test the Crusader line. Richard and Saladin were like two chess players, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. The Battle of Arsuf was coming, a clash that would change the world forever. 94 people have seen the start. September 7th, 1191, the Crusader army reached the forest of Arsuf. Saladin saw his moment. He ordered his entire army to strike the line. The air was filled with the sound of drums and trumpets. 10,000 horse archers circled the Crusaders. They fired arrows while moving at full speed. Richard told his men to stay perfectly still. If the line broke, they would all die. The Crusader infantry held their shields tight. They were like a moving wall of iron. The heat was unbearable. Many men were collapsing under the weight of their armor. The pressure was too much. The knights, Hospitaller, could not wait any longer. Saladin's elite Mamluk cavalry charged the rear of the line. They broke the line and charged. The rest of the knights followed them like a flood. Richard saw the charge and realized he had to join. He led the center himself. The two armies crashed together in a massive wave of steel. Saladin stayed in the middle of the fight to encourage his men. He saw the power of the heavy knights. They were like iron giants in the desert. But the Mamluks were brave. They fought with everything they had to protect the road to Jerusalem. The sun began to set. The field was a graveyard of broken wood and metal. Richard had won the day. But Saladin's army was not destroyed. The two leaders looked at each other across the field. A new respect was born. The battle was over, but a new story was beginning. A story of honor. Saladin heard that King Richard had fallen ill with a terrible fever. In the middle of a war, most leaders would be happy. But not Saladin. He said a king should not die of sickness in a tent. He should be healthy and strong. Saladin sent his own personal doctors to the Crusader camp to help his enemy. He even sent baskets of fresh pears and peaches from the gardens of Damascus. And for the king's fever, Saladin sent a gift more valuable than gold. I see. Richard was amazed. He had never met a man as noble as Saladin. When Richard's horse was killed in another fight, Saladin acted again. He stopped his soldiers from attacking. He sent two beautiful Arabian horses to the king. Saladin sent a message. It is not right for a great king to fight on foot. They began to write letters to each other every week. They talked about peace and justice. They began to write letters to each other every week. They talked about peace and justice. Richard even suggested that their families should marry to bring the two worlds together. The soldiers on both sides saw this respect. They stopped hating and started talking. The war was not about hate anymore. It was about two lions trying to find a way home. Saladin showed the world that a Muslim warrior is defined by his mercy. This was the golden age of honor. The desert would never forget these two men. Richard was tired of fighting. Saladin wanted his people to live in peace. In 1192, both leaders realized that Jerusalem could not be won by blood alone. They decided to sign a treaty. It was called the Treaty of Jaffa. Saladin made a promise that shocked the world. He opened the gates of Jerusalem. He allowed Christian pilgrims to enter the city without weapons. He promised to protect them. He didn't take a single coin from them. He said, "The house of God is for everyone." The Crusaders were amazed. They had never seen a conqueror with such a kind heart. Richard knew he had to go back to England, but he didn't want to leave as an enemy. He sent a final message to Saladin, "Give me 3 years, and I will come back to fight you again." Saladin smiled and sent word back, "If I must lose my land, I would rather lose it to you than any other king." They never met face to face, but they were more than friends. They were equals. Richard sailed away. He told his people that Saladin was the greatest man he ever knew. Saladin spent his final days giving his wealth to the poor. He kept nothing for himself. When he died, he didn't even have enough money for his own funeral. He had given everything away to help the people of his empire. His legacy was not the battles he won. It was the mercy he showed. Today, both Muslims and Christians remember him as the perfect knight. The War of the Lions was over, but the lesson of honor remains forever. The war ended in 1192, but the story of the two lions never died. Richard the Lionheart returned to Europe. He told every king about the Sultan's honor. He said, if the world had to such leaders, there would be no more war. In the East, Saladin became a symbol of justice for all Muslims. He showed that a Muslim leader is a servant of his people. He left behind no gold, no palaces, and no riches. He left behind something better, a name that stands for mercy. Even hundreds of years later, his enemies still respected him. They saw him as the perfect knight of the East. The history of the Crusades is often a story of blood and pain. But the meeting of Richard and Saladin was a light in the dark. It reminds us that even in war, we can choose to be human. It reminds us that respect is more powerful than any weapon. Saladin died in 1193, but his spirit lives on in every act of kindness. The Lion of the Desert and the Lion of the West, forever joined in history. Thank you for watching this journey through the past. If you value honor and history, you are part of this tribe. We are at 94. Be the legend who makes it 100. Subscribe to the history of the world.